Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
From an audience perspective, why isn't LinkedIn bringing in leads even though you are showing up and posting? Our guest today is Daniel Alphon. Daniel joined LinkedIn back in the early 2004 and has learned the platform inside and out, often the hard way. After making just about every mistake you can think of, he's turned those lessons into a clear strategy that helps his clients see real organic results. Today, Daniel shares exclusive insights, interviews, and advanced LinkedIn strategies through his website, danielalphon.com, helping professionals grow their presence with intention and impact. Daniel, welcome. Good to have you here, sir. What is your favorite quote or saying?
Thank you very much. It's a Bruce Springsteen song, the live version, The River. At one point, he asks, is a dream a lie if it don't come true? Or is it something else? Or is it something worse? It's so sad when he sings it. I still remember the feeling I got hearing it the first time.
It's good when a song has that impact on the soul. 2004, you've been at it for a while. This is really good. What were the early mistakes that you encountered in LinkedIn?
The first was misconnecting. This could come as a surprise, but I learned the hard way that you had to pick one. With my clients, I basically asked them in 4 years' time, if you had to pick one, would you rather be the most connected or the best connected? The most works, the best works. Trying to combine them, that's harmful, and that's probably the worst connection strategy. I started that way.
Excellent.
What are the most overlooked parts in the profile? What makes it not do as well as it should?
I would advise someone to visit their LinkedIn profile. You would be amazed to see that in some cases we have a profile photo, but when someone shows our profile, we no longer see that photo. So it will take you 10 seconds to ask someone who's not connected with you to bring up your profile and make sure your profile photo is visible. Next, there's the headline. The headline is very important because it's the most important real estate we see on our profiles. And then I would mention the featured section and the banner.
So what do people do wrong? You mentioned mistakes. What's the people who think they're doing okay that aren't jump out at you?
Not being consistent and expecting LinkedIn to behave differently than the way it behaves in the real world is probably the single most important thing I see in common. We have a real life personality, and introverts don't have to play a game to appear smart on LinkedIn. There is a place for everyone, and if your personality works, you don't have to become someone else just for the sake of the platform.
Be the real you then.
Yes, because when people know you and they see something you're doing and they ask themselves, what was Bernie thinking? It's not a good sign. You should be aligned with the words you use, the tone of your voice, what's important to you. And authenticity is actually the simplest and best way to behave because you don't have to remember what you are. You just have to continue doing that on the platform. The platform is here to serve us.
That's true.
Microsoft has unlimited money. And you would think that having unlimited money, they could make the user interface more pleasant. Why is it so profoundly ugly?
The LinkedIn UI, the look and feel? Yes. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. It looked like they brought an amazing team to analyze the way the platform works. And the result of the analysis were two notebooks, one with the things that work and one with the things that need to be fixed. They mixed up the notebooks and the teams. So any part that's working, LinkedIn tries to play with that. The things that don't work never change. It's sad, but I don't think it's intentional.
This is a good thing. I know that if you're on a web page and you're putting content out, a search engine optimization is part of the deal, finding the right keywords, being authentic to yourself, but also using the right wording. Does that also apply inside the LinkedIn space?
Challenge for us is that we know so much about our business that we tend to think of keywords that are way more specific than our prospects. Prospects may not run a search for coaching. He may run a search for the term. They need help with, we need to combine the words we would like to be described by and the words that our prospects would use. Think of the human reader, but use the keywords for the algorithm.
How do you optimize your LinkedIn profile and how often should you do it?
So let's start with the second question. Every quarter, I think would be a good idea to put aside 30 to 60 minutes and to simply read it and see if there's a gap. Sometimes we pivot. Sometimes we would just want to add an AI term for search, just like the SEO Bernie mentioned. Once a year, I think it makes sense to rewrite it or reconsider it. Sometimes we offer a new service. Sometimes there's a gap between what we tell clients and what they see on LinkedIn, but the gap is not a healthy one. So having a system in place that enables us to read it and make sure that it's up to date with what we'd like to project in the future is the easiest way to do it. And the three questions I would ask is, one, who's our ideal reader? Two, if we could make those people visit our profiles, what action would we like them to perform after they read our profile? And the third, are we making it as easy for them to find and understand that we present the answer to their pains? Everyone listening knows who their ideal clients are. And they basically also know if there's a web destination they would like to point to, or if they would rather that people jump on a strategy call or contact them or anything else in this sense.
I've noticed in a couple LinkedIn pages, and they see little changes or options like book a call or go to my website. A clear call to action. Do you recommend embedding calls to action in one central place, but not all over the place? When I go shopping on some major retailer platforms, the name will be unmentioned, but they're everywhere. And I think they're trying to go to space too, if not there. And you always have a button that either let's cash this out, let's make all the purchases happen now. But you don't, is it meant to be structured that way? Are you intending to structure it that way? Or is the call to action buttons limited in a couple key places?
We are limited by human psychology and not the LinkedIn buttons, if you like. Because what you mentioned may appear when I visit someone's profile, before scrolling, before reading anything, I would say book a call. But Bernie, in real life, you would never book a call before you understood that you had the time and energy, and you would be really interested in meeting that person. Like book a call is too much initially. Once we discover the wealth of information and we understand that we'd like to speak with you, that would be the ideal time to say book a call. So if you like to think of it as a funnel, when someone visits our profile, the call to action should be reading more about what we bring to the table. That is a lower ask. And then maybe conversion will happen on our website and not on LinkedIn. Conversion happens much better on our respective websites than on LinkedIn. If people go to creativeinsight.com, you have a funnel. If people go to motivateatu.ca, they have a funnel in place. So let's just move them to the right direction.
That makes sense. How do you, because you touched on something in that process. Hey, I got to know more about you. Do I want to? Do I have a need? And you're going to take care of that need. That's a hook. Right? How do you provide, without sounding like a carny huckster with a town crier, how do you draw somebody in and to hook them into going, yes?
The more you know your clients and the more you know your prospects, you can easily remember what makes them tick and the challenges they face. Mind you, it makes more sense to help them with understanding where they're at and helping them take one baby step towards the solution. That doesn't mean that we meet someone and we ask to marry them or we ask them to buy our services. We show them that we're trustable, and then we move them from point A to point B. By the time they reach the end of point B, they say, hey, I understand that you also offer C&D. In other words, we don't have to sell, they want to buy.
is storytelling. And LinkedIn was mostly for look at my articles. Has video changed that? Is there a place for both? What's your take on how to recommend storytelling on LinkedIn?
Can I tell you a story about that, Wayne?
Please.
You see what happened there? It's much more interesting than any fact-based answer I would give to the neck up thing. Storytelling is great, and it can help a small company level up with the big guys. Storytelling is difficult because initially we want to service everyone. We want to be a solution for everyone, and storytelling requires us to have one particular story in one particular set. You can do it using video, like you said. Video is pretty strong on LinkedIn. It would make sense to make sure that the video has subtitles because most LinkedIn users don't have voice turned on. And with the younger generation entering the workforce, it has to be short, relatively short, and something they can scroll and get a point in 60, 50, 70 seconds or less. So we basically ask ourselves, can we remove something from this and still make a point? If it's important, it needed to be number one.
People take great pride in their abilities. When you meet a client that has just a hideous LinkedIn process, how do you tell them their baby's ugly?
In many cases, they understand that the baby is not stellar. People also sometimes even are harsher judges of than us or the world. But the simplest way to do it is to understand that LinkedIn has a certain purpose for our business, and there would be other places where we could upload photos of lasagnas and stuff like that, and they would have their place there. But we don't have to do that. We don't have to have only kittens on LinkedIn. Don't be that person.
I had a chat with somebody else, and he does a business networking space. And usually it's, like you said, the one topic, et cetera. Once a week, he runs a farm. And he shows the baby goats. And it's just like a one-off. It's like the main course of the business changes, but he throws in one element that's different. And some people like that element. It's not at his prime time when he releases it. It's like a Sunday post for him. Do you treat or view the content you're pushing out as a commercial then, a 30-second to a 1-minute commercial? If you're watching the Super Bowl and all of a sudden up comes something and it's captivating you, do you treat your content like a commercial?
The parallel is in making sure that the very first seconds, going back to Wayne's video or the text, if it's an article or posts, are engaging. And it requires editing and rewriting because our minds usually tell the story in a chronological way, and we need to pick something that's authentic but juicy and intrigue our audience. So in that sense, it's not a commercial saying RSP to this, but if we ask a question that people are intrigued about, we may pull the ones that are interesting for us to read, to dwell on that content, to want to know more. And we also need to take into account that some people will not be interested, and maybe those people are not our audience. And we should accept and acknowledge that.
So on some quick research, I found out there are more coaches on LinkedIn than people in Israel. How do you make yourself stand out? And if you're trying to stand out, what metrics do you use to make sure you're doing a good job?
Excellent. I'd like to start with the metrics. The metrics, from my perspective, Wayne, are the business metrics. Imagine I go to your website, contact you, or jump on a strategy call. Say you have something like 10 calls a week, pre-LinkedIn. And you start using LinkedIn and you direct them in a duplicate, like a unique URL. You know that people signing up or people scheduling a call only came through LinkedIn. You can measure and know that those 3 additional calls were from LinkedIn. The more important question would be, could you convert those 3 in a higher or lower proportion than usual? Would you rather work with those people than the current ones you're working with? And if you're happy with the results, then the metrics would not be the LinkedIn vanity metrics. It would be your funnel. It would be your business. You would know how to convert an additional call or the 3 additional calls into long-term coaching clients. You don't have to know LinkedIn. Think of LinkedIn as a black box. You have a system in place. Does it feed the top of the funnel? And can you translate those into revenues? If you succeed, forget about LinkedIn. And if you don't succeed, play with it once more until it feeds the machine in the best possible way. I got an impression that if I wanted to be coached by you, you would help me understand very serious insights, but you would do it with humor.
You went about like this.
What I said would be great for some clients and maybe bizarre for others. You don't think about it, the ones that don't want it. You don't need to become someone for their sake. There are enough people who would like the real Wayne, find them.
If you're using Wayne as the example and you resonate with Wayne, how do you sort through a cluster of folks? Let's say you had 50 coaches on LinkedIn. You type in hashtag coach and maybe another hashtag that refine it down because you can be coaching everything how to swim to how to eat to, how to think. But listen, you finally refine that down. How do you pick out of the 50 do you go through all 50? Is there some sort of filtering process from your past experience?
I'd like to consider real life for a second because Carl Richards has mentioned that maybe it would be a good idea for us to chat. And in real life, especially if you're talking about coaching, which is highly personal, it's not a commodity. If it's commodity, I don't mind whether it's Amazon or something else. I know what I'm buying. But if it's coaching, the personality of the person is very important to the coachee, to the prospects. We want to encourage referrals. And one way to do it would be to network outside of LinkedIn. The second way would be to run an advanced search. If you know your network well enough, within less than 5 minutes, you would find someone, could be an interesting prospect or someone interesting to coach. You would see the name of the mutual connection and could ask them to make an introduction. When someone runs a search on LinkedIn, even if they find Wayne in 49 less able coaches, the assessment process does not have to take place on LinkedIn. Often it happens in real life. They may have discovered Wayne on LinkedIn. But if someone says, yes, I think you would hit it together, that's much stronger than any SEO we could have magically insert into Wayne's presence on LinkedIn.
Okay. One thing that interests me is I'd like to hear about somebody who came to you and you offered them some really good advice and seemed too simple or too obvious or too strange. And you said, please, just try it. Just try it. And it worked.
When he approached me, he said he was overwhelmed because he was posting 5 times a week. And I get way too often. I'm crushing it and I'm wrecking my brains out and I produce content for LinkedIn. And then I see that the impressions number are excellent, but nothing happens in my banking account. What's wrong? What is happening here? And at one point, I asked some very simple questions and we decided to focus on real life conversion and running an advanced search, finding 3 interesting prospects. That took that gentleman less than 10 minutes. Speaking with the right person and making the introduction may have taken another hour, but by the end of the following month, they had a contract and slept better because they could say, you know what, instead of posting 5 times a week, I'd like to post once every 3 weeks. That gave them control instead of being in a rat race and trying to add more stuff. Most of our network is not that interested in reading our musings and thoughts. So it's counterproductive to try to add another piece to that and thinking that content piece number 49 is going to resonate with people if you haven't so far.
Repurposing content. We're doing a podcast now and we'll have an audio soundbite. There'll be an audiogram. There'll be a YouTube element. And if you're a guest on this show, I say, hey, here's the Zoom feed, the raw feed. Take from what you need and repurpose it. Is that of value? In other words, you're on LinkedIn, you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, TikTok. Pick another platform. I'm sure there's more out there that haven't hit the roof yet. Is that of value? Do you replicate what you say inside LinkedIn elsewhere? And how do you leverage that?
So my process would be not to systematically replicate 100%, but to have a very simple flowchart. Is this content relevant for this platform? And in some cases, Bernie, you would say yes. In some cases, you would say no. In other cases, you would say, I'm not sure. So it could mean that I think repurposing is underutilized because it takes less time than producing high quality content. Instead of just duplicating, we could take one bit that's relevant to the platform or a discussion we'd like to emphasize there and point to the raw episode or to the whole podcast at the end. So we would actually focus on an intriguing question or something that happened. And it could be that for one platform, you would use question number 3, and for the other platform, you'd use question number 5. Both would lead into the same lead magnet, or the same podcast, or the same content, but it doesn't have to be one way unless it makes sense.
I have a question for my listeners that's about Daniel the person. Your 2 hosts are in Ontario, Canada. You have clients in the States. You're in Israel. Zoom is an international platform. What made you decide to go global? How did it work? And what was the head shakes where you went, that wouldn't be if I was working next door? Tell me a story about being an international entrepreneur.
The world is our oyster. It's not that one day I decided now I would go global. Initially, like back in 2007, I had the LinkedIn epiphany. Back then, 30% of my time was dedicated to find the right decision maker within the company I needed to reach out to. LinkedIn just showed me the name of the person that enabled me to beat my quota and to have more time. Then I started helping friends. Those friends at one point said, I'd like you to work to train our sales team or train our executives. And then one thing led to another. The Knack for Business podcast, I may get listeners that I would have never worked with if I'm limited to physical presence or going to the Chamber of Commerce and exchanging business cards. It's always interesting to work with people from different cultures. There are some technical challenges, like when Canadian time changes yesterday. I needed to think about that because we're no longer on the same page, but it's still very rewarding to see that people from Ontario and Tel Aviv have the same challenges and are using the same platform. LinkedIn has over 1 billion users, and every second, 3 people sign up. Most of the growth is outside of the US. In Canada, Europe, Israel, and Asia.
When someone reaches out to you, it's more entertaining when that happens. What type of due diligence do you do when a profile comes knocking in your door? Might have something what might be a dress you need, but what type of due diligence do you do when you're looking at their profile? And what are the key indicators going yes or no?
Piggybacking on Wayne's earlier question, the assessment would be in a real life call and not just based on people's profiles. One major mistake I did as a solopreneur was accepting every sort of business that came my way like 10, 15 years ago. And right now, 90% of my business is based on referrals. People would not come cold. They would say, I got your name from Jane Doe, I got your name from Ben, and that would mean we're starting the conversation with a higher level of trust. When I speak with potential clients, 90% of my questions are around their business and not their LinkedIn usage. Because what they do on LinkedIn, I can see. But only you, Bernie, can tell me what's a good lead from your perspective and what's happening on your business. Once I understand that, in some cases, I would say, great, we could work together and here's how. In other cases, I would say I'm not a good fit. here's someone who could be a good fit for you. Or in many other cases, we can't work together before you decide or make up your mind about A, B, and C.
LinkedIn etiquette. I've been told that cold ask is still death, but what is some LinkedIn etiquette so a person will know that they're not actually offending the people they're trying to reach?
10 to 15 years ago, there was a trend, let's call it connect and nurture. I would send you a custom invitation request, and then I would send you a resource. And by the third or fourth message, I would ask you to jump on a call or do something like that. It turned out that most people who do that are now basically spammers. Because we know that the minute we get an invitation like that, it would end in people offering us services we didn't think we would ever need. And instead of connect and nurture, which is potentially good idea, it became spray and pray. Like throwing spaghetti on the wall, knowing that one bit out of 2,000 would work, and disregarding the fact that for the market, we have devaluated and harmed and jeopardized our brand. The fact that it's easily done and it could be automated does not necessarily make it worth our while.
We've talked about what we as users of LinkedIn would capitalize on. How do we best approach something? Do we keep it short, sweet, simple? Do we tell a story? How do we tell the story? How often do we post? What are we posting? Do we have a cat video? Do we put out requests for marriage proposals, etc.? All the answers of most of those are no. From the flip side, though, what have you found from the people that are going, I'm looking for, and what holds them back? Is there something that we as the creator of the LinkedIn page or the LinkedIn business page even, is there something that we should be mindful of that what hangs most people up from going, let me call that person?
That's the toughest question. We could try and see how we help people understand the process. It makes people to discover you and understand that what you bring to the table is important for them, has various stages or various steps. The single most frequent mistake here is to try to jump from point 1 to point 10, and it signals like a red alert from our end, going back to the clients I turned down, not because I didn't want to work with, but because they needed to do A, B, and C. Some clients ended up working with me up to 5 years after the initial call. But the moment we spoke initially, I thought that what they should speak with Jane. And eventually, the fact that they liked working with Jane or appreciated the recommendation put you in a nice spot. Once they're ready, they would reach out to you. Trying to force that, Bernie, is hardly effective. It usually doesn't work. So many people are trying to game the system that we forget there is a real process that can work, that used to work with LinkedIn and may actually work outside of LinkedIn. Everything we need to do on LinkedIn is actually support that and not try to have some bizarre ways to turn people into dollars.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the crypto phase of most people. It's like someone opening up their raincoat going, want to buy a watch? That's a bit dated, along the same vein.
I'm going to put something out a bit of where I've been to some of my newer solopreneurs. I found that when you had the head of Google posting and writing an article, and the head of Microsoft writing an article, and the head of Sun Microsystems writing an article, imposter syndrome kicked in. Who'd want to talk to me? I'm just a little coach in Eastern Ontario. Having said that, do you find that not being Idella scares some people away from LinkedIn?
So I think there's a difference between my clients are not on LinkedIn. My clients are on LinkedIn, but I don't get the system. If our clients are not on LinkedIn, I wouldn't advise anyone to spend time on LinkedIn unless they want it. You could also leverage LinkedIn to learn, to gain new knowledge. There's a whole section that could be interesting for you as an individual, as a solopreneur. But if your clients are on LinkedIn, then the resource you need to actually invest is not money, but time. If you start playing within the LinkedIn system and you don't know it and you pay for a premium account, you can't actually leverage it because you don't know the difference between the free product and the paid one. And LinkedIn is so overwhelming, so rich, so confusing that my guess is we use less than 10% of the free abilities. So investing time in the system, try to see if it could work for you and build your own method of leveraging LinkedIn. That would make more sense than to try to throw dollars on it and expect some quick ROI.
Is the fact that it's a Microsoft product now, and then you have Outlook as your means of communication, that sounds like a pretty good integration. Are there integrations with other software that are permitted? I know there's some that are not, because LinkedIn goes, oh, hang on, you're not being authentic. You're robocalling. We don't like it when politicians do it. We definitely, so we're not spamming us with garbage emails or garbage contacts. Is there anything that we can leverage that works?
When Microsoft made the acquisition of LinkedIn, people were very afraid that Microsoft would turn it into something else. But they didn't make it a Microsoft territory. You could use LinkedIn. I bet a large chunk of our listeners don't necessarily associate LinkedIn with Microsoft. And it's important to represent the whole ecosystem and everyone, not just Microsoft users. LinkedIn cracks down on any sort of automation that is contradicting the terms and conditions we signed up when we joined the platform. I'm afraid there is no API you could use. The single most important one we see is when someone wants to submit their application to a job posted on the website, you'd have a small sign-in with LinkedIn, which means you authorize the website to pull your information from a LinkedIn profile. The application time would be reduced to maybe 30 seconds instead of 5 minutes. That is something LinkedIn encourages. But everything else, as you said, it cracks down, and I can't see any major way to use LinkedIn outside the LinkedIn native ecosystem.
I'm a bit of a storyteller. We all dream about somebody pressing an easy button and all of a sudden they appear on my calendar. But how do we get a question back that's organic and legitimate that shows they read the article?
If you use LinkedIn to learn and read content, there's a magic button called follow, which means that you could find the head of Sun or Oracle, whatever company, and you would be able to subscribe to what they post. And there would be many ways for you when to actually leverage it. First of all, you could improve, you could learn. Other than that, you could take that resource and send it to someone. Say, hey, I read this and thought of you. So you would strengthen your relationship with that person outside of the LinkedIn platform. And the third way that could be interesting if you're authentic about it would be to comment. No longer works, or there is a problem with something linked to, or something that would actually help the author to improve and update their content. And in other cases, you would ask follow-up questions that would help the whole community, the author, and yourself. It takes a bit of time to try to find the right question. It's not like reading something about sports and commenting, oh, this reminds me of my service. I'm a coach for farmers. It doesn't make sense.
I might use that. I actually like that.
When you're pushing out content and or you see someone else's content and you're going, wow, I know somebody that can use that. And then I know that if you type the @ symbol and then the person's name, it highlights it. So they'll get a nudge and you write some content in there going, I could say, Daniel Alphon, you might really like this piece. It seems to resonate with what you're saying and doing. And if I put that in the comments section, that causes it's almost like making a splash in the water, the ripples that come from it. The post itself has a ripple. And then when you're actually making, well, hey, that's interesting. Or it's your own post. And then later on, you're like, I understand there's a cap on how many people you can mention inside a post, but less so outside of the post. Does that provide a good churn? Is that providing that authenticity, providing that extra reach? Is it a good strategy?
I think I would suggest that when we comment on a post or an article, try to ask an open-ended question. So instead of saying, hey, this is great, I like your perspective, awesome, that's nice, but there's no continuation to it. When you shared the latest episode of Knack for Business about community, and the gentleman said that when he had a bad quarter, he could reach out to his community, I would ask my question. The question should be authentic, but it should be an open-ended question, which means you could answer the question and maybe tag Wayne or mention someone else. So this would be like in real life, you would call up someone and ask them to provide their expertise. Don't just say, this is a great resource. Try to say why you liked it. And even in some cases, you could actually say, I disagree with this part. I liked everything you said, but I object to point 3. And here's why. If you do it in a respectable way, I think the author himself or herself should actually encourage that. You don't have to say yes to everything.
I think this has been a really interesting time with LinkedIn University. What can our entrepreneur take away one act that makes his or her LinkedIn better that you would like to see them doing if they could only do one point?
Thank you, Wayne. Ask someone who's their ideal client to look them up on LinkedIn and share their thoughts as they read our profile. In other words, when I visit your profile, if I'm a prospect and I visit your profile, I would say, when you say you're passionate about positive progress, what do you mean? And please resist the temptation to answer the question, because then you would lose the follow-up remarks that person has. So you say, that's great, maybe I'll refer to it later, what else? Then they will say, when you say X, do you mean that? And when you say this, does it mean that? Understanding what people think when they visit our profile would help us go back to the drawing board and improve it further. And then you could also explain or answer the questions they have, but don't treat it as the questions, treat them as a way to get feedback. Sometimes you would be amazed. You would say, I thought it was clear. This is my angle, but 3 people have said that they misunderstood this. So it's not their responsibility, it's mine. Ask someone to look you up and share their thoughts without sugarcoating anything.
What's the best way to get a hold of you?
DanielAlphon.com is the way to go.
I want to say thank you to Daniel Alphon, my co-host, Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. If LinkedIn is an area that you have experience in, no experience in, or want improvement on, reach out to Daniel, and he'll be a great resource for you.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, waynemotive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.